Snow exploded around them as red tracer rounds tore through the white darkness. Each impact briefly illuminated the frozen ground before vanishing again. Rotor wash ripped at loose gear and ice as the helicopter dropped low, battling crosswinds. The noise was so intense it felt physical, vibrating through bone. A seal element collapsed toward extraction under increasing fire boots, slipping breath ragged. A voice broke over the radio, strained, asking if she was clear. Another reply came too fast, overlapping, already moving past the question. Her call sign cut through the static once, then again louder this time, sharp with panic. Elena lay flat in the snow, rifle locked into her shoulder, cheek pressed to cold steel. Her breathing remained slow and deliberate, as though the chaos belonged to another place entirely. She didn't need the radio to understand what was happening. The helicopter's angle. The shortened hover. Precision replaced by urgency. She felt no anger, no surprise. Only focus, narrowing into something clean and exact. The helicopter lifted early. The sound pulled away, fading into the storm, leaving behind a silence that felt violent in its own way. Snow drifted down where her team had stood seconds earlier. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. Helmets faced forward. Eyes dropped. The urgency was gone, replaced by something heavier. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Elena Mercer was in her late 30s, a Navy SEAL sniper sergeant with far more years in uniform than most people realized. Her service record was long, dense, and quiet. The kind that filled folders, but rarely found its way into stories. She never advertised it. She didn't need to. Physically, she blended in. Average height. Lean build. Movements so efficient, they were almost forgettable. She carried herself without stiffness or swagger, as if nothing about her required explanation. In rooms full of louder personalities, she was often overlooked simply because she didn't demand space. Within the team, her reliability was hard to quantify. She arrived early, stayed late, listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her voice was calm and stripped of excess. In briefings, she never competed for attention. She asked questions only when something truly mattered. That restraint was often mistaken for passivity. She wasn't the loudest voice. She didn't interrupt. She didn't push her opinions unless the situation demanded it. In a culture that prized speed and confidence, her composure sometimes read as distance. New team members occasionally assumed she was support rather than strike logistics instead of lead. No one said it outright, but it showed. When roles were assigned, her name was rarely called first. When aggressive positions were discussed, eyes passed over her without intent. It wasn't malice. It was momentum, the unspoken gravity of expectation. There were jokes, too. Careful ones. Someone once laughed that she treated every approach like a textbook problem. Another said she was too careful for the rotation, too measured for a place that demanded speed. They were framed as teasing, but they carried weight. Elena never responded. She smiled once, briefly, and returned to checking her gear. Her discipline lived in details others missed. Before every mission, she checked her rifle twice, not from doubt, but because repetition settled the mind. Magazine seated. Bolt smooth. Scope clear. Safety tested. Then again, slower, fingers moving in the same order. Inside her plate carrier, pressed flat against her chest, was a folded Christmas card. The paper was soft at the edges, creased from handling. She had read it once in silence. She didn't reread it. Knowing it was there was enough. In the field, Elena noticed things early. A light that went dark too late. Footprints that didn't match local movement. Wind carrying sound from one direction but not another. She didn't announce these observations loudly. She shared them when timing mattered. Often, timing mattered only to her. The team trusted speed and pressure, technology and tight schedules. Elena trusted spacing, angles, and the feeling a place gave off just before it turned against you. That difference widened as the deployment dragged on. She'd learned patience early, long before it became fashionable. She'd seen what happened when confidence outran caution, when momentum replaced judgment. Those lessons cut deeper than rank or qualification. Her calm, unsettled people at times. Incoming fire didn't change her breathing. Near misses earned only a slight shift in position. Once, someone asked how she stayed so composed. Elena shrugged. I pay attention. As Christmas approached, fatigue settled over the team like fog. Missions stacked closer together. Sleep came in fragments. Command wanted results before weather shut the window completely. Forecasts worsened. Timelines didn't. The briefing took place in a cramped room, maps taped to walls, condensation fogging the windows. Voices overlapped as routes were debated and contingencies trimmed. Extraction windows were narrow. Risk was acknowledged, then compressed into acceptable margins. Elena studied the map quietly, calculating distances in her head. She noted terrain funneling movement into open ground. How weather would blunt visibility and sound. When a pause opened, she spoke. Her suggestion was small. A different overwatch position. A slight delay that would reduce exposure during extraction. The response came quickly, wrapped in urgency. No time. The window was already tight. Someone joked they couldn't afford scenic routes tonight. The room moved on. Elena leaned back, accepting the decision without protest. She'd done her part. She would adapt. That was the discipline she trusted. As the briefing ended, chairs scraped and voices rose. Elena folded the Christmas card once more and slid it back into place. Outside, the cold cut sharp. The sky hung low, heavy with snow. Elena paused, eyes lifting toward the dark, reading the wind as she always did. The night felt tight, compressed, waiting. The call came to gear up. The mission would move fast. The margin for error would be thinned. Once again, Elena Mercer would not be the loudest voice when it mattered. They stepped off with the confidence repetition creates. The route rehearsed. Timings memorized. Contingency words already waiting. At first it felt routine. Elena moved with the team, but not with their mood. She watched what didn't show on maps. Corners where sound bent wrong. Rooflines where snow settled unevenly. Walls the wind pushed again, stand others it ignored. The first crack wasn't danger. It was delay. A gust forced the point man to brace. The column tightened. Radios chirped, more often confident words with an edge beneath them. Later, a light flickered in a window that should have stayed dark. Someone joked about Christmas hospitality. Elena didn't laugh. Weather shifted in layers. Air thickened. Wind snapped sideways. Snow turned from flakes into a curtain. Visibility collapsed into short distances and guesswork. That's when she felt the ground tighten. She slowed half a step, eyes lifting toward the ridgeline. White made errors stand out. A shadow paused where it shouldn't. Snow disturbed too carefully. She keyed her radio comm, precise. A suggestion. A minor route change. The response came fast. Negative. Stay on timeline. Copy, Elena said. Enemy movement increased. Not an ambush yet. Observation. Pressure testing response. The team answered with speed. Spacing tightened. Jokes died. Radios clipped. Confidence frayed. A single shot cracked the night. Stone shattered near the front. Then another. Measured. Watching. Elena caught a flash on the ridge and called the bearing. The response was frustration. They wanted movement, not analysis. We don't have time for this. The phrase landed heavy, not cruel, just familiar. Elena answered with one word. Copy. They pushed faster. Snow turned ground into exposure. Shots followed in intervals. A radio overlap shattered clarity. Meaning arrived broken. The leader pushed toward the original extraction. Don't deviate. Elena heard enough to know it was wrong. The pilot had warned of worsening wind shear. One pass. Maybe none. She keyed up again, calm but firmer. Repeated the warning. Offered an alternate extraction. The response came sharp. Too much noise. Too little margin. They kept moving. The extraction zone opened wide flat. Exposed, unforgiving. Helicopter lights pierced the storm. Rotor noise roared. The aircraft fought the wind. Enemy fire tightened. Snow burst under impacts. Walls cracked. Sound distorted. The team moved in bursts. And the night closed in. Sprint, drop, cover, scan. The rhythm held, but it was strained. Comes grew clipped, urgency replacing confidence. Survival had taken over the tone. Elena stayed near the rear as they crossed, not because she fell behind, but because she covered angles the others couldn't. Her scope moved steadily ridgeline, broken walls to the right, then a shadowed gap that felt unnaturally still. The helicopter sank lower, rotor screaming. The pilot called the final approach window. He couldn't hold. He couldn't risk losing lift. In these conditions, the aircraft could become a grave as easily as a rescue. Operators climbed aboard. The helicopter dipped under added weight and violent wind. The pilot warned against seconds left. Elena watched the team compress toward the aircraft, saw them count heads through blowing snow. She recognized the change in the team leader's posture as the math turned brutal. He wanted everyone out. Physics demanded otherwise. Enemy fire snapped closer. The air felt compressed. The storm pressed in. The helicopter rose slightly, then dropped again, fighting to stay controllable. Elena keyed her radio. Her voice carried no emotion. Move. She had the angle. She would cover the last stretch. The net went silent. She felt the hesitation, not doubt, not cruelty. But the instant when someone realizes they're about to carry a decision forever, the pilot called it again. The choice was made. Not from fear or pride, but from physics. The helicopter could not wait for perfection. More bodies and gear crowded the door. Rotor wash turned the snow into a blinding wall, erasing sightlines and faces. Elena dropped lower, anchoring behind a shallow wall that gave her a narrow but critical view. She fired only when necessary each. Shot deliberate, shaping enemy movement away from the team's path. She shifted by inches, shrinking her silhouette, denying the enemy a clean fix. Her call sign burst over the radio once. Then again, sharper, panicked. Elena answered without heat. She told them to go. The helicopter rose. The sound changed as it climbed into stronger wind. Lights blurred, then vanished into the storm. Elena felt the moment it crossed from rescue to departure. She didn't beg. She didn't curse. She didn't make the night about her. She stayed prone, rifle locked into her shoulder, cheek pressed. Too frozen metal as the storm swallowed the aircraft and left behind a silence that hit like impact. Ahead, enemy shapes shifted, sensing opportunity. Behind her, the team's tracks vanished beneath falling snow, raced as if the ground itself wanted to forget. Elena recalculated the wind, adjusted her aim, and settled deeper into cover. The team moved toward safety. Elena Mercer stayed behind. The silence layered itself slowly. Snow fell without urgency, but without mercy. Filling the space where sound should have been, Elena remained still for several breaths, letting the quiet speak before she disturbed it. Then she moved. Not fast, not obvious. Elbows slid inches. Snow packed tighter beneath her chest. Legs adjusted to spread weight without leaving a clear outline. Every movement was precise beyond training manuals, learned in nights rather than courses. She scanned again. Ridge. Broken walls. Open ground. Enemy behavior hadn't stopped. It had changed. No rushing. No probing. They waited now, cautious, as if aware something unseen was watching. Elena flexed her left hand once. The scar along. Her knuckles pulled tight in the colder remnant from another war, another sky. She didn't linger on it. The body remembered what the mind didn't need to revisit. Her radio crackled softly. Low power. Distant voices overlapping. She kept transmissions minimal, conserving both battery and presence, somewhere on the net. A voice spoke her name, not loudly. Not as a call, but as recognition. Elena didn't answer. Enemy movement tightened. They tested angles carefully, sending one figure instead of many. The first time, she let him pass. The second time, She adjusted her scope by feel, counting clicks in her head. Reading wind without lifting her eyes. She fired once. The shot was clean, absorbed by snow and distance. The figure dropped and vanished into white. Elena didn't follow with another round. She shifted position instead, rolling slowly to a secondary point already mapped in her mind. Distances recalculated constantly. 300 meters to the ridge, less to the nearest wall. Wind pushing left, easing, then gusting again. She waited for the pattern to repeat before acting. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Another winter. Colder. Breath freezing behind fabric. A night when retreat had been possible but refused. Holding ground so others could move, the memory arrived without emotion and passed just as quickly. A second figure appeared where she expected. She fired again, not to kill, but to shape movement. The round struck stone, close enough to force retreat. Voices murmured in the distance, sharper now. Confused, Elena let the silence stretch. Silence carried more weight than gunfire. It invited mistakes. A rushed shot came back wide. She noted the angle, adjusted, and answered with a single round. The return fire stopped. She shifted again, slow and deliberate. Snow erased her tracks as quickly as she made them. The storm worked for her now, distorting sound, bending direction. She had learned long ago to make conditions allies. Her magazine was still good. She checked by touch, counted rounds without looking. Enough radio whispers filtered through static. Reports of stalled enemy movement. A question about how many operators remained on the ground. No answer came. Elena stayed focused. Her world was small in exact angles, distance, timing. She could leave. The route back was dangerous, but possible. The storm offered cover. The enemy hesitated now. She considered it for a single breath. Then she looked toward where her team had gone, the open ground. They'd have to cross if extraction returned. The unseen angles, the ridges that would come alive when rotors cut the air again. She pressed deeper into the snow and reset. Retreat would save her. Staying might save them. Elena Mercer stayed. She didn't chase the fight. She let it come to her, veiling itself in small errors and nervous movement. The storm hit her, but she never trusted it completely. Whether it was a tool, not a shield. Minutes passed. Deliberate nothing. Then a shadow moved behind a broken wall. Two, smooth to be drifting snow. Elena tracked it with the slightest shift of her rifle. She waited until the figure committed, until distance and wind aligned. Then fired once. The shadow folded and vanished into white. No follow-up shot. No reaction. She moved. A slow crawl back. A careful roll into a shallow depression. Snow pressed. Into the space she'd left, smoothing edges until her outline disappeared. She moved like someone who had learned that survival meant never being where the enemy expected. Enemy. Behavior changed immediately. The next figures hesitated, then withdrew as if the ground itself had spoken. Elena waited. Breathing steady. Eyes scanning. A faint click. A whisper of movement. Another approached tighter, cautious. She tracked him for seconds, reading pace and tension. She fired once, not at him, but at the stone above his head. Rock and snow exploded into his face. He recoiled and retreated hard. She let him go. Warnings traveled faster than bodies. Enemy voices sharpened. Urgency bleeding through wind. Elena didn't need words, only the shift. Confusion, doubt. The realization that they weren't hunting a stranded operator anymore. They were facing something organized. Overcomes, distant reports aligned. Enemy movement stalled. Fire intervals controlled. Angles changing with intent. Someone said it sounded like more than one shooter. Elena smiled once barely. The illusion held. She crawled to another firing point. Snow erasing her trail almost instantly. Settled, aimed through a new lane. A figure appeared where expected. One shot. Down. She moved again before the origin could be tracked. Blind return fire followed wasted rounds into walls and air. Elena waited. Let impatience burn itself out. When it stopped, she delivered a single round cold. Precise toward the loudest voice, it went silent. Enemy movement slowed further. Confidence gave way to fear. Elena's discipline fed that fear. No spray, no panic. Every shot chosen. She counted rounds by touch. Enough to hold, enough to shape the night. Far away, senior voices asked quiet questions. No one rushed to answer. Elena repositioned again, choosing a wider arc at the cost of comfort. Cold seeped into her ribs, grounding her in reality. This wasn't a story. Bodies failed. Mistakes killed. The snowstorm became her defense-covering movement, bending sound, forcing second guesses. She used it like fog at sea, not to hide from danger, but to control perception. Another flank attempt, low and careful. She waited until the figure crossed open snow. One shot, he fell. Everything stopped. No fire. Elena held position, ignoring fatigue, ignoring the burn in her arms. Discomfort was background noise. It always had been. Would you run or stay to protect people who had already left? The question hung in the storm, unanswered. Asterisk far away, in warm rooms filled with screens and radios. The tone of the night began to shift. What had first been reported as a stranded operator no longer sounded like desperation. It sounded organized. Someone noticed that the enemy element had stopped advancing altogether, as if held in place by something unseen. Supporting unit voiced what others were already beginning to suspect. Whoever was down there knew how to hold ground while outnumbered. Whoever was down there wasn't merely surviving. They were controlling the fight. Elena knew none of this. She didn't need to. She fired once more, not because it was necessary, but because it reminded them she was still awake, still watching, still capable. The shot wasn't loud in the storm, but its meaning carried. After that, she let the silence stretch again. Enemy silence grew heavier, not the calm of patience, but the uneasy quiet of doubt, the kind that settles in when people stop believing the next move will work. The enemy had more men, more angles, more reason to think they could overwhelm her. But they no longer moved like men who believed that. They crouched behind walls, peered into the snow. They whispered instead of shouted. Confidence thinned into hesitation, hesitation into doubt. Doubt into something close to respect? Elena remained hidden, half-buried, letting the storm erase her presence. She listened for the smallest shift, watched for the faintest movement, treated every second as a decision. Minutes passed slow, deliberate. The enemy did not advance. Silence pressed down on the valley until it felt as if the night itself was holding its breath. Somewhere behind cover and uncertainty, men who had come hunting realized they were afraid to step into the open. Far from the storm, in a dim operations space washed in the pale glow of monitors, a senior operator leaned forward in his chair. He had been silent for several minutes, ignoring the low chatter around him. His attention wasn't on the reports themselves, but on the gaps between them, the timing of shots, the pauses, the way enemy movement slowed, reshaped, then stopped entirely. This wasn't luck. This wasn't desperation. What he was watching had structure, restraint, control. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt the room. He asked one question, quietly enough that it nearly disappeared into the hum of equipment. Who's still on the ground? At first, no one answered. Fingers hovered over keyboards. A roster was checked, then checked again. The room, once alive with low conversation, thinned into silence. A junior analyst finally spoke, reading from the screen as if uncertain the name belonged in this moment. Elena Mercer, Navy SEAL, Sniper Sergeant. The name landed and stayed. The senior operator's posture changed. Subtle, unmistakable. His shoulders squared. His expression tightened it, not with surprise, but recognition. He leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving the screen. He remembered her, not from headlines, not from commendations, from another winter years earlier, another valley, another mission gone wrong, a night when withdrawal had been possible but costly, when one calm voice on the net had held ground no one else could, keeping an entire element alive. The reports from that night had been sparse. The results had not. He said nothing more. He didn't need to. Those closest to him understood what had just been realized. The room remained quiet. Screens flickered. Radios murmured. But the meaning had changed. What had been assumed to be survival was now understood as command. The senior operator nodded once, not approval, not pride, acceptance. Back in the storm, Elena lay where she had been for hours. Snow gathered along her shoulders and helmet, nearly erasing her outline. She brushed none of it away. Her focus stayed forward, eyes steady behind the scope, breathing slow and controlled. She eased tension from fingers beginning to stiffen. Enemy movement remained minimal. That absence told her more than gunfire ever could. Her radio crackled faintly, then settled. No new orders came. None were expected. She checked one sector, then another. With each breath, she felt the folded Christmas card press lightly against her chest. She didn't think of home. Didn't think of recognition unfolding far away. She thought only of angles, wind, and the simple truth that the night wasn't finished yet. Somewhere distant, people who had doubted her now understood exactly what kind of steadiness held the valley in check. Out here, alone in the snow, Elena Mercer remained unaware. She stayed still. She stayed ready. She held the line. The helicopter didn't roar back into the valley. It returned carefully, almost reluctantly. Lights dimmed. Approach shallow. Rotors strained against a wind that hadn't loosened its grip. Snow still fell, thinner now, drifting instead of tearing, as if the night itself had grown tired. Elena heard it long before she saw it. She didn't lift her head right away. Rescue was when mistakes happened. She kept her rifle steady, eyes fixed on the same angle she had covered for hours. The aircraft hovered at the edge of open ground, testing the air. A small element dismounted first, spreading slowly, weapons raised, scanning every shadow. They expected resistance. Expected the silence to break the wrong way. They didn't expect to find her still holding. Elena remained prone, half-buried, gear-crusted white, breathing measured. Her rifle tracked the approaching operators until recognition settled in. Only then did she ease the muzzle down just enough to signal friendly. No one shouted her name. No one ran. They slowed instead. One knelt beside her, searching for blood, for injury, for signs the night had taken something from her. Elena shook her head once. That was all. They helped her to her knees. Her legs protested, stiff and numb. But she steadied herself without leaning longer than necessary. She glanced once toward the ridge, confirming what she already knew. It was quiet. Completely quiet. They moved her toward the helicopter without speaking, as if words might fracture something fragile. More operators emerged from cover, helmets turning toward her, eyes holding hers a moment longer than usual. There was no disbelief in those looks, only understanding. Inside the aircraft, the air felt different than it had hours earlier. The frantic edge was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. Elena boarded last, pausing only to check her sector one final time before releasing it. The door slid shut. The helicopter lifted. Only then did helmets come off. Gloves pulled free. Goggles pushed up. Faces emerged pale with cold and exhaustion, eyes rimmed with something deeper. No one spoke. The rotors filled the silence, and that was enough. The team leader stood across from her, the man who had pushed the timeline, who had cut off her warnings with urgency and fear. He didn't look away now. He removed his helmet slowly and held it against his chest. Then he raised his hand in a quiet salute. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't formal. It carried no performance. It was honest. Elena met his eyes, then nodded once. She didn't return the salute. She didn't need to. The acknowledgement settled the space between them. No one else saluted? They didn't have to. Respect showed in eased shoulders, softened eyes, and the absence of explanation. Someone handed her water. She took a small sip and passed it back. Someone asked if she was hurt. She shook her head again. That was all she said. As the helicopter climbed away from the valley, no one replayed the fight. No one filled the air with relief or bravado. They sat with the understanding of how close the night had come to ending differently. Elena leaned back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes, not from relief, but from fatigue. The folded Christmas card rested against her chest, unchanged. When she opened her eyes again, the team leader was still watching her. Their eyes met for a moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Then Elena looked away, back to her gear, back to breathing. The helicopter carried them through thinning snow, leaving behind a valley that would remember the night in its own quiet way. No cheering followed them home. No speeches were made. The moment asked for nothing more. The hours that followed were deliberately quiet. Reports written without flourish. Timelines corrected. Maps marked and folded away. Chaos gave way to paperwork. Danger to memory. Elena sat through the after-action review with the same posture she carried through everything else. She answered precisely, without emotion. When questions drifted toward her decisions alone in the valley, she redirected them to terrain, weather, and timing. Facts mattered. Credit didn't. When the room thinned, she gathered her gear quietly. In a corner away from noise, she removed her plate carrier and reached inside. The Christmas card was still there, edges worn soft. She unfolded it just enough to see the familiar handwriting, then folded it again and slid it back into place. Some things weren't meant to be shared, only carried. The team moved differently now. Conversations paused when she passed, not from discomfort, but awareness. Old assumptions had broken apart. No one needed to say it aloud. The narrator lingers here not to elevate one soldier above others, but to remind us how often courage hides behind silence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't interrupt. It waits, preparing for the moment when steadiness matters more than recognition. Most acts of valor happen without witnesses. In storms, in darkness, between decisions, carried out by people who never ask who's watching. They're overlooked because they're calm, forgotten because they don't demand to be remembered. Elena never corrected those who underestimated her. She didn't rewrite the story afterward. She returned to her role with the same quiet discipline she always had, letting the outcome speak. The world remembers heroism through noise and ceremony. The truth lives elsewhere. It lives with those who shoulder responsibility without asking if it will be seen, who stay when leaving would be easier, who hold the line because someone has to. That is where real courage exists. Courage does not ask to be seen. It only asks to be steady when it matters. Christmas looks different for those who serve. It isn't marked by warmth or celebration, but by cold ground, long hours, and decisions that don't pause for calendars. While families gather under lights, there are service members standing watch, carrying responsibility in silence, asking nothing in return. This story isn't only about one woman, one night, or one mission. It's about the many who shoulder the weight alone, who stay steady when conditions collapse, who measure success not by recognition, but by who makes it home. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to remember those who serve through the holidays unseen, uncelebrated, holding lines most of us never have to see. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, subscribe for more veteran stories so courage like this is never forgotten.